When the stage lights dimmed, no one could believe it. Mussolini unearthed such a detail from the dusty pages of history that everyone's thoughts were shaken. One single book written by Georges Sorel in 1908, he said with a trembling voice, changed not just my destiny, but the fate of the entire 20th century. Without this book, there would be no fascism, nor the world order we know today. The hall fell into silence. Mussolini raised the worn book in his hand. Reflections on Violence. The ideas that shook the world were hidden between these pages. The book's mysterious author, who was Georges Sorel? Why did a French railway engineer venture into social theory and present ideas that would change world history? Mussolini's eyes gleamed strangely as he posed this question. Sorel wasn't just a theorist, he said. He was a prophet who saw the collapse of the bourgeois order. Born in Normandy in 1847, Sorel spent the first half of his life as an ordinary civil servant. But when he retired at 45, this is where everything changed. He devoted himself entirely to social theory. He read Marx but didn't stop there. He studied Nietzsche, Bergson, and finally, he created his own radical theory. Mussolini slammed his fist on the table. This man was the first to say that parliamentary democracy was a system of lies. And I, as a young socialist, was captivated by these ideas. Violence and force, the dangerous distinction. Wait a minute, don't miss this detail, said Mussolini, opening a page of the book. Sorel's most dangerous idea is hidden here. He made a revolutionary distinction between violence and force. What was force according to Sorel? The coercion used by the state, police, army, the pressure applied to maintain the existing order. But violence? Violence was something entirely different. Violence, Mussolini whispered, was creative. Violence was a sacred weapon used by the working class to destroy the bourgeois order. Violence was moral. Violence was regenerative. Violence was beautiful. The hall fell silent again. Everyone understood how dangerous these ideas were, but Mussolini wasn't finished yet. The general strike myth, the impossible dream. Sorel's genius wasn't just in glorifying violence, Mussolini continued. His truly brilliant idea was the theory of myth, and the perfect example of this theory, the myth of the general strike. What was the general strike? All workers, all laborers stopping work simultaneously, the complete paralysis of the bourgeois order, the collapse of capitalism. But here's the shocking part. Sorel said it didn't matter whether this would actually happen. Do you understand? Mussolini shouted. The power of myth wasn't in being real, but in its capacity to mobilize people. I took this idea and created my own myth, the rebirth of the Roman Empire. Mussolini's voice was trembling now. He seemed to be reliving the past. In 1919, walking through the streets of Italy, I remembered Sorel's myth. I didn't appeal to workers, but to war veterans. I gave them a new myth, and it worked. Myth theory. Emotions defeat reason. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. Mussolini opened another section of the book. Sorel said myths couldn't be refuted by rational arguments because myths appealed not to logic, but to emotions. This idea was so powerful that Mussolini made it the foundation of his movement. I didn't explain economic theories to people, he said. I promised them pride, honor, victory. I gave them a myth. But were myths just dreams? Mussolini shook his head. No. Myths, according to Sorel, were images of a future battle. They were visions of a victory not yet realized, but that would come to pass. Bourgeois decay and the new aristocracy. One of Sorel's ideas that influenced me most, said Mussolini, lowering his voice, was the moral decay of the bourgeoisie. The modern bourgeois class had grown soft. Comfort, security, convenience, these were weakening society. Mussolini stood up and began pacing the room. Sorel was right. Real progress was only possible through conflict and struggle. I took this idea and transformed it into the doctrine of permanent revolution. This is where everything changed. A strange smile appeared on Mussolini's face. Sorel's idea of the creative minority was the foundation of my vision of a new aristocracy. The black shirts represented this elite. You won't believe this, but Mussolini paused. Sorel characterized working-class violence as moral. This violence wasn't destructive, but creative. It was building a new civilization. This idea had deeply affected Mussolini. When I was a socialist journalist, I read these lines, and I understood that violence wasn't just a means, but also an end. Violence would renew, purify, strengthen society. Mussolini's voice rose. When I marched on Rome in 1922, Sorel's book was in my pocket. With every step, I remembered his words. The values of heroism and sacrifice can only be revived through violence. Rejection of parliamentary democracy. But the truly shocking thing was Sorel's complete rejection of parliamentary democracy. Compromise was weakness, Mussolini shouted. Dialogue, discussion, voting, these were all bourgeois lies. According to Sorel, real change happened not in parliament, but in the streets. Direct action, strikes, sabotage, these were the real revolution. Mussolini had taken this idea and transformed it into fascist doctrine. Liberal democracy was corrupt, said Mussolini. Sorel saw this in 1908. I applied it in Italy in the 1920s. Not parliament, but the street ruled. Wait, don't miss this detail. That gleam reappeared in Mussolini's eyes. Many historians try to find the intellectual origins of fascism. The answer is hidden in this book. Sorel's ideas hadn't just influenced Mussolini. The entire Italian fascist movement was built on these ideas. Myth, violence, elite, direct action. All of these came from Sorel. But I surpassed Sorel, said Mussolini proudly. He only thought of the working class. I thought of the entire nation. He was internationalist. I became nationalist. He was close to anarchism. I advocated for a strong state. Mussolini closed the book. His hands were trembling. This book didn't just influence me. Hitler had read it too. So had Stalin. All the dictators of the 20th century had taken something from Sorel. The glorification of violence, the power of myths, the rejection of democracy. These ideas had led to the deaths of millions. But Mussolini didn't seem remorseful. Sorel was right about one thing, he said. History is written not with rational arguments, but with emotional myths. I created my own myth and made history. This is where everything changed. Mussolini's voice lowered, almost to a whisper. Sorel's most dangerous idea was his exaltation of irrationalism. Not reason, but instinct. Not logic, but passion. Not science, but faith. This idea had shaped the modern world. Propaganda, mass psychology, populism, all derived from Sorel's myth theory. Even in the 21st century, said Mussolini, politicians apply Sorel's lessons. They create myths, appeal to emotions, reject rational debate. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. Mussolini stood up and walked to the window. This book is still dangerous, still influential, still being read. Modern protesters, radical groups, extreme right and left movements, they all take something from Sorel. Direct action, street demonstrations, violent acts. Sorel's legacy lives on. Ironically, said Mussolini, Sorel thought he was a socialist, but his ideas were mostly used by fascists. He dreamed of workers' revolution, but inspired nationalist dictatorships. Mussolini turned and looked directly at the audience. His eyes held both pride and some regret. Those who want to read this book should be careful. Sorel's ideas are poisonous. Once they enter your blood, they're hard to remove. I was a young and idealistic socialist when I read this book, and these ideas transformed me. They created a dictator, changed the fate of millions. Mussolini placed the book on the table. Reflections on Violence isn't just a book, it's a weapon. Depending on who uses it and for what purpose, it either creates or destroys. Epilogue. The Dark Legacy. The stage lights began to slowly fade. Mussolini's silhouette was disappearing into darkness. His final words echoed in the hall. Sorel was right. Myths don't die. They transform, take new forms, influence new generations. And one day, perhaps soon, a new Mussolini, a new Hitler will read this book. And history will repeat itself. The hall was completely engulfed in darkness. Only the book on the table gleamed under the spotlight. Reflections on Violence still there, still waiting for its next reader. You won't believe this, but this book is still sold on Amazon today. It's taught in universities. And who knows, perhaps right now, somewhere in the world, someone young and idealistic is reading these lines and dreaming of changing the world. Sorel's legacy lives on. So does Mussolini's warning. Ideas are dangerous, especially ideas that appeal to emotions based on myths that glorify violence. History is a warning, but unfortunately, people don't listen to history's warnings until it's too late. The book remains there, under the dim light, as if waiting for its next victim. The cycle continues. The myths persist. The violence beckons. And somewhere in a corner of the world, another young mind is being seduced by these dangerous ideas. Mussolini's ghost seems to whisper from the shadows. I warned you. I showed you what these ideas can do. I became living proof of their destructive power. Yet still, the book sells. Still, it's read. Still, it influences. The French engineer who became a philosopher, the socialist who became a fascist, the ideas that became actions, the actions that became tragedies. This is the story of how one book changed the world. Not through reason, but through myth. Not through peace, but through violence. Not through democracy, but through the will to power. And the most terrifying part, these ideas haven't died. They've adapted, evolved, found new hosts. In internet forums, in political rallies, in extremist manifestos. Sorel's ghost haunts us still. The stage is now completely dark. Only the echo of Mussolini's final words remains. Beware the power of dangerous ideas. They seduce, they transform, they destroy. I am proof. History is proof. And if we're not careful, the future will be proof too. The book closes, but its ideas remain open, spreading through time like a virus, waiting for the next susceptible mind to infect. This is the true horror of Reflections on Violence, not that it was written, but that it continues to be read, continues to influence, continues to seduce those who believe that violence can birth a better world. In the end, Mussolini's testimony serves as both confession and warning. He shows us what happens when dangerous ideas meet ambitious minds. He reveals how theories become movements, how movements become regimes, how regimes become catastrophes. The lesson is clear, even if we refuse to learn it. Some books are more than books. They are weapons waiting to be wielded. And Reflections on Violence remains one of the most dangerous weapons ever forged by the human mind. Hit subscribe to reveal the forgotten tales that shaped our world and ensure no influence remains hidden in the shadows of history.